Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rachel and this is Constellation Library. So today I am going to be going over all of the books that I read in October. I also plan before the year is out to do a couple of what I read in 2020 videos from before I came back to BookTube, because I do have 20-ish books that I want to talk to you about that I haven't had the chance to talk to you about yet. So that is forthcoming, but we are just going to focus on the books that I read in October. So overall for 2021, my goal was very small. It was just to read 21 books. This was my first year being a mom. We had our son in October of last year, so I just really had no earthly notion of how much I was feasibly going to be able to read this year. So I just tried to make it a relatively easy goal of 21 books. And I've read 37, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. That is 176% of my goal. I am surprised at myself, and that gives me hope to be able to read more next year as well. In addition to the 13 books that I did read this month, there were 2 that I started. Technically 3 that I started. 1 I barely even got into, so I'm not really counting it, which I'll talk about those as well at the end after I've gone through everything that I did read. And a lot of these books, I probably am not going to remember everything that I would have liked to have said, because it is November 7th when I'm filming this, and I've had very little time to really focus on gathering my thoughts about this, but I wanted to make sure that I could get this video out in a timely fashion, as timely as possible with the child. That is the thing that the child has made a little more difficult, is filming, because I try to film when he's asleep. And if I can't do it during a nap time, I have to do it after he goes to bed, and that means it has to happen at night. I have my ring light here. I don't know if it washes me out, but yeah. So any parents out there who know what I'm talking about, trying to make content is kind of hard when you have a 1-year-old. So yeah. But I'm going to go ahead and go through all of the books I read first and then get into the graphic novels. So the first book that I want to talk about is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Cloon. This particular book I was highly anticipating. This one and one other that actually both came out in the end of September, and I read them for October. One of my most highly anticipated reads for 2021. I absolutely adored The House in the Cerulean Sea that came out in 2020. It was my favorite book of the year. So when I heard that this one was coming out, I was obviously super hyped about that. And it did not disappoint. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. It ran me through the gamut of emotions. I laughed, I cried, I was angry. I was just indescribably sad. There are obviously trigger warnings in here for death, suicide, child loss, and then the grief of losing a child, which, if you were around when I had my channel before, when I was the Bookish Witch, I talked a little bit about that. I lost my daughter. She was only a month old. So the representation of child loss in this, and specifically the grief that the mother goes through when dealing with this child loss, is very realistic, and it kind of felt like I was looking in a mirror. And while it was difficult for me to read, I think that it was very important to have been included. I don't often see realistic depictions of a grieving mother and child loss in that way, and how just destructive it is to everything about you for a really long time. And I thought that Cloon did a really great job of being realistic and raw and respectful of it. So keep that in mind. If you or someone you love has experienced child loss and it would be a triggering thing for you, you might want to tread lightly. But as I said, even though it was very painful for me to read and made me relive a lot of things that, I relive it anyway, but it's usually of my own volition. Like, I choose to remember those things most of the time, so to not be expecting it, which, I mean, it's a story about death, so I guess I was sort of expecting something to trigger me, but it wasn't that. So yeah. But I say all that to say, the general synopsis of this book, you have a man named Wallace Price. He is a lawyer. He's not very well liked in life. He's a pompous asshole, basically. I honestly, in the beginning, wasn't sure how much of this I was going to be able to read, because he was that just insufferable. But I knew from House in the Cerulean Sea that that was obviously not going to be the same. Plus, the premise of this book, I suspected it wouldn't be the same. But basically, Wallace is awful, and then he dies, and he is picked up at his own funeral by a reaper who takes him to see the ferryman who's supposed to help him cross over to the next life, whatever that might be for him. But Wallace is not ready to die, and he meets a number of characters and learns a lot about himself, who he was, who he wants to be, who he hopes to be, and the wishes that he has for just his life. He definitely experiences a vast character change in this and grows a lot, and it was really enjoyable to witness. And other aspects of the book are just wonderful. There is LGBTQ rep in this. There is interracial love in this, which I enjoy as well. And just overall, it was really a book that was cathartic for me and just beautiful in every sense of the word. It was beautiful. So I highly recommend this. 5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely great. Did not disappoint. I knew when I was highly anticipating it that it just wouldn't disappoint me because Cloon, I don't know, something about him, he's masterful. The next book and the second book that was my most anticipated read was Empire of the Vampire by J. Kristoff. Now, I love J. Kristoff. I absolutely adored his Nevernight series. I love the Illuminae files that he did with Amy Kaufman. So far, anything that he has written that I have read, I've enjoyed. A very quick rundown of this. There's obviously, it's a chunky thing, and I am not even really sure how to totally summarize it for you, but the basic premise of this book is that there is an event called Day's Death that occurs, and Day's Death essentially is where the world is bathed in darkness, the sun does not rise the way that it used to. It's the way that I perceived it, it was almost like a red smoky haze covers the sun. So there technically is daytime, but it doesn't ever get bright enough that vampires cannot walk out during the day. It's almost like twilight-ish hours. And then the rest of the time it's really dark. There's not enough sunlight for things to grow. So there's mushrooms and mold and all kinds of nastiness. The world building was really good in this, and he made it super atmospheric. So that was interesting. But because of Day's death, the vampires have basically taken over. The humans are just trying to survive because the vampires can come out whenever. They're not as strong during the twilight daytime hours, but they can still be a force to be reckoned with, and they are absolutely deadly when night falls. Our main character, Gabriel de Leon, is a member of the Silver Saints. It is an order of basically religious warriors that have the duty to fight against these vampires. And they are trained in a monastery of San Michon, which is one of the saints of the religion. This religion is very closely, to me, I'm not a religious person, but it seems like it's closely modeled after Catholicism, Christianity. And the main character is, at the beginning of this book, he's being interviewed by a vampire who he is actually a prisoner of. And the vampire that's interviewing him wants a chronicle of his life related to this big event that happens. I don't want to give too much away, but you have two different timelines, and Gabriel talks about himself as a child, growing up, and then becoming a ward of San Michon and being trained there, and becoming a Silver Saint and all that sort of thing. And then it has the other timeline of him as an adult where he is just really haggard and beaten down, and the faith that you see in him in his youth is not there anymore in his adult life, and he's just been through some shit. And it's interesting, the two different timelines, the juxtaposition of those, and you see how he grows and what happens to him to make him the way he is now as an adult. It's just really, really enjoyable. I loved Nevernight, and if you love Nevernight, you will probably love this because it has very similar vibes. If you did not like Nevernight, this is honestly more of the same type of writing, so you probably wouldn't like this either. But I've always loved vampires, and I've been waiting for somebody to do justice to vampires again, and he really, really does. They are not good in this. They are not sparkly. They are not. They're just not. So, I wonder, if there may be some overlap, if there may be vampires that are not bad. But so far they're pretty much all bad, which is honestly a breath of fresh air that they're not the romantic interest as they usually are in a lot of fiction. So 5 out of 5 stars. Highly, highly recommend this. I thoroughly enjoyed every second of it. I spent way too much on this version of it secondhand. This is the Illumicrate edition. I have 4 copies of this book. One of them is the Barnes & Noble special edition. One of them is the UK edition. And then I have another Barnes & Noble that I put a special cover on that I bought. So I'm a little obsessed. I'm ready for him to have the second one out. He totally broke my heart through this. Like, I felt very emotionally abused by the end of it. So go into it knowing that you're going to feel all the feels also. The next book that I read was one that was a super easy 5-star for me as well. I had a really good reading month. This was The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and it is very different than the other two. This is more of a mystery sort of puzzle sort of thing. I have heard it compared to Knives Out, and while I haven't seen Knives Out, you will have to be the judge of that for yourself, but it's basically the story of a girl who inherits $46.2 billion from a man named Tobias Hawthorne, who she has never met in her life. She does not know why she's inherited this, and it is very surprising to her, obviously. She comes from nothing. She was living in her car when she got the news that this was happening, and so she goes to the estate of Tobias Hawthorne and finds out that his whole family is there. And while they haven't been totally disinherited, they've gotten very little of his wealth that has been bequeathed. Basically, all of it is going to her, and none of them know who she is. It's just this big mystery, and apparently Tobias Hawthorne loved mysteries. He loved puzzles. His whole entire house is one big puzzle. He raised his 4 grandsons, who are key players in the story, up on puzzles and mystery and trying to have them solve things all the time. He just apparently was a big weirdo. I don't know. But so all 4 of them are very good at unlocking secrets and codes and things. And the main character is as well. And I don't remember her name. Avery. So Avery Grams, she is the main character, and she is also very intelligent and very good at solving riddles. And so she basically teams up with the Hawthorne grandsons to attempt to figure out why on earth this man that she doesn't know left her all of this money. So 2 of the Hawthorne grandsons, Jameson and Grayson, so far, I'm not sure if it expands out further than that, but they are essentially kind of 2 points of a love triangle for her, which I don't mind that. I haven't read a good love triangle story in a while, honestly, and I'm hopeful that this will be one of those. I generally don't love that trope unless it's done really well, and so far I'm very interested in how it's going to be done for this, because that's clearly what it is. But just all in all, I had a really good time with this. I can't think of anything about it that I didn't enjoy. It was fast-paced, the riddles to me were very interesting, and the ending was a cliffhanger. Big reveal happens at the end and preps you up for book 2. Book 2 was one of the books that I actually started but didn't finish. That is called it's back here somewhere. That one's called the Hawthorne Legacy, and I got maybe 20 pages into it. So I would like to read that one soon, but I've just got a whole bunch of other things that I want to try to read first. But yes, that was a really enjoyable time. 5 out of 5 for the Inheritance Games. The next book, one that I also loved like 99% of, but the end of it totally ruined it for me. And that was White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. Where to begin with this book? So let me start with the premise. You have your main character, Marigold, her brother Sam and her mother, her stepfather, and then her stepsister, Piper. I don't remember mom and dad's name. So, and they're not overly important, honestly. Anyway, so these are the characters in this family. They are a mixed race family. Piper and her father are white, and Marigold, her brother, and her mother are black. And that matters at some points in the story. There are little instances where that matters. But basically, this family, they are moving to Cedarville, it is a town in the Midwest, on a grant. It's an art grant. And they are going to live in this house for free while her mother finishes her book. And they essentially just have to blend in with the community and live there for a while, all on this art grant. And the idea is to bring more people to the town, revitalize the town. It has kind of fallen after the recessions and everything, fallen into disrepair. The setting is a Midwestern town. I think it's modeled after Detroit a little bit. There's instances of the book that makes me think it might be modeled after Detroit, but you have this big, beautiful old mansion that they move into that has been renovated on a street where every house is empty and burned out. It's Maple Street. And then across from Maple Street, you have a community of mostly black folk who live in their area, and it's very segregated. It seems to be that there's pretty much only black people that live over in the other side. Nobody comes on Maple Street at all. And then if you see white folk, they are in a different part of town. So it's very much comes across to me as the area that they're portrayed to live in is almost like the stereotypical ghetto setup. And Mari's family, the house that they move into is very odd. Very odd things happen. The people who are working to renovate it, they look like they want to be literally anywhere else while they're there. They are, like, when their alarms go off at 5:15, they drop their tools where they are and they literally flee the scene. Like, they don't even want to be there. Hey. Sorry, that probably freaked you out. Freaked me out for a second too. My house has like a tiny little crawl space between the laundry room and like a lower level, and the cats like to try to go through the crawl space and freak me out, which I don't appreciate. Anyway, where was I? Oh, the house. A lot of weird stuff happens. There's a smell emanating. There are lots of strange noises. There are people's shadows that seem to walk by at night and all of that. The horror elements of this are done so well. So creepy. Probably one of the freakiest books I've ever read. Like, totally freaked me out. Marigold has a, what's the word I'm looking for? Phobia of bed bugs. So if that is something that's like super gross to you to read about, it is prevalent in this. It's repeated over and over. She has a very serious phobia of bed bugs. You don't super know all the details of why she has that phobia. You learn a little bit about it, but not all of it. And so there's some of that adds to the creep factor, and the house itself, all the weird stuff that happens there, the fact that they live on this street where nobody else lives and all the houses are burned out, and that, like, you just know that there's secrets to this town. Nobody from the other part of town wants to come onto their street. They just stand at the end and look down at them. And the black people that live in the other area are like really hostile towards Mari and her family. And it again, there are some details given as to why that is, but nothing is ever super clear. The foundation that puts the family here is obviously like wealthy white people. It deals with ideas of gentrification and different things like that. And basically all hell breaks loose and shit gets real. Shit hits the fan. Like, there are fires. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in this. And it just ends. And when I say that, I don't say that like to be like to kid. Like, it is like this author submitted 80% of a draft and then just decided she wasn't writing anymore, and it was going to be published like that. It feels like she left off in the middle of a sentence, like she left off in the middle of a scene, It does not feel complete whatsoever, and that is why I could not give this book any more than 4 stars. Initially, I gave it 3 because I was so fucking mad. I literally, guys, like, I got to the end of this book. I was flipping because it's in the heat of some intense shit. And then it just ends. I got to the end and I like peeled the pages apart and tried to look at the binding to see if I was missing pages from this book, because I could not believe that that is where the author would end it. So when you see reviews and people say that the ending is abrupt, they're not fucking kidding. And it's more than abrupt. It's unfinished. It truly, truly feels unfinished to me. And that is my biggest gripe with this, because it had so much potential. Everything else about it was amazing. Like I said, it dealt with some topics of gentrification. There is a prison in here. I don't remember what they call it, but essentially it is full of the people, predominantly Black people from this town, on nonviolent offenses like weed offenses. Essentially, you learn that they came through and they cleared everybody out. And so there's a lot of people that are in this jail, and a lot of the young people that are left. There's only a few boys. The majority of boys are in this jail. And so like there's kind of some competition for the remaining boys who aren't in jail. That is like a side thing. And it's just a lot. And then there are issues of like the town having secrets that it doesn't want to face, and mob mentality, which bothered me. Like, I understand that mob mentality is a thing, but the way that this mob is portrayed and what they do and why they do it feels like it frustrated me, because these people are human beings and I feel like it portrayed them in a really negative light. When I think the goal was to portray like the gentrifying force that has put them in this position in a negative light. And yeah, that sort of happened, but it didn't. I felt like the spotlight was on the wrong people. I felt like the really bad folks that were causing a lot of the issues in this book, it was deflected. Their guilt was deflected onto these people just trying to live. And maybe I just read it wrong in that way, which could totally be the case. I am not from a demographic that has dealt with the sort of things that the characters and like the larger community in this book has dealt with. But I wanted to give those characters more credit than I felt like they were given. I don't want to give too much away. I know I'm being very vague here, but I felt like the large Black community in this was not portrayed with kindness. They were made to look like they just followed. They were portrayed like they were stupid. I don't really know how else to say it. Like they were easily led, which I didn't know until I read the author's note that this is actually based off of an episode of The Twilight Zone, which made everything make a little bit more sense to me. And a lot of people won't read the author's note, so I want to read it to you now so that you know going into it. But so the episode of The Twilight Zone that she's referencing is called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And so this is the theme of what she's trying to do with this book. The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own. For the children and the children yet unborn, and the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone. So after having read that, a lot of the things she did in here made more sense, but nothing had any sort of conclusion. All of these various lines of really interesting shit that she started, none of it wraps up, and then the book itself just ends. I don't know if anyone else felt this way about this book. Please comment if you did. It was literally a 5-star read right up until the end, and I was so fucking mad. I want this to be a series. I want her to touch on the prison. I want her to touch more on the gentrification. I want to know what happens with the people that are in this village that are going to be displaced. I want to know what happens with Mari's family, because you don't even know if everyone's okay by the time this is over. So, you know, and then there's some other characters that I want to know what happens to them. I want the bad guys to get theirs, like, and I know society, like, especially in a racist society, the bad guys rarely get theirs, and maybe to make it realistic they wouldn't need to, but I just wanted more. It was so good, I just wanted more, and I did not get enough. And that is why it didn't get a very great rating from me. Like, but I can't stop thinking about it. So I rated it a 3 to start out, and the longer, I still think about this book all the time, and I read it at the beginning of October. So I don't know. It has crawled back up. It's like a 3.5 or a 4, 5 or a 4, but it could never be a 5 because she turned in an unfinished manuscript, in my opinion. I don't know if I'm going to get hate for that. And I apologize if you absolutely love this book and saw no flaws in it. And that is totally valid. I wanted so much more. And I cared so much about all of the characters. I wanted to know more, and I just didn't get it. I guess I just have to be used to disappointment because I'm pretty sure it's a standalone. So the next book that I read, I actually read on audiobook. I'm going to stick it up on one or the other side here. But that was The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. It is the sequel to A Deadly Education. To give you a little bit of background, I obviously don't want to tell you about the plot of The Last Graduate because I don't want to give anything away, but A Deadly Education focuses on our main character, Elle, who is a magician, a magic wielder. She is enrolled at a school called the Scholomance, and it is essentially a magic school. All of the kids who go there, they have magical abilities and they have to survive. So the Scholomance has no teachers. The kids essentially teach themselves, and the kids have to stay alive while they're there. There are beings called Mals that try to kill them constantly. They have to check every room. Mals can be hiding in every nook and cranny and could pop out and eat your face off. So they have to ward themselves. They have to prepare. They ration their food. They ration their clothes. They don't shower all the time because nowhere in the school is safe. And that has a lot to do with the fact that there was a machine that was part of the school it was called the Cleansing Fires, basically, and Mortal Flame, I believe is what they call it, and it would clear out all of the Mals every year when kids would graduate, but they broke. And so for however many years, the school has not had those Cleansing Fires available to destroy the Mals, so they've just overrun the school, and you just essentially need to survive till graduation. The school exists in kind of its own plane of existence. You magic your way in and out through portals, and it's very interesting. And you can become part of an enclave, which is a group that outside of the school holds a lot of power in the magical community. And so a lot of their kids, there's a cup on the floor that my cat is fucking with. Sherlock. I don't know which cat it is. So basically the goal of any kid in this school, if they're not part of an enclave already, is to become part of an enclave in the grand scheme of things, because that's where you get your protection outside of the school. And you can contribute to the magic that they wield and all of that sort of thing. So it is pretty good. I think I gave 4 stars maybe to A Deadly Education. I gave 5 stars, 4.5 stars to The Last Graduate. I loved the majority of it. I was interested in the majority of it. I don't know if Naomi Novik does this in all of her books, but the way that she wrote this one, it's like you'll be going through the story and then all of a sudden the main character will go off on a tangent about something. And I think that she does it for world building, but after a while it gets really annoying. Like we're in the middle of a kind of an important scene and you're going off on a tangent about these people from this place from years ago that have contributed to X, Y, or Z in the present when it's not related to what's happening. And I think Becca in the books has talked about that as one of her reasons why like it's hard for her to enjoy these books. She does like them, and I also do like them. But after she said that, I read this one and really noticed it. And I was like, oh my God. Like there were several times I'm like, can we just fucking get on with it, please? So do with that what you will. I still rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars. So obviously I still really enjoyed it. And it wasn't enough to like make me not want to read any more of the series, but it was a thing. So keep that in mind if you ever decide to read this series. I think it's best listened to, and you just kind of got to get through those bits where she's being overly descriptive about stuff that is not relevant to the story in the moment. So that marks the end of all of the novels that I read. There are several graphic novels here that I read as well, and I'll just kind of start from the top and quickly work my way through them. So the first one is the Tea Dragon Tapestry by Kay O'Neill. I have read the other novels in this series. This is the third one, and it is adorable. It's essentially a graphic novel, but it's almost kind of like a picture book. It's for children, middle grade readers, and it is just such a wholesome and lovely series. Tea dragons are these little creatures. They're little dragons, and they grow tea leaves, and they do that when they're happy and well cared for, and they share their tea leaves with their caregivers, who they can, boil it and make tea out of it, and it's just a way for them to bond and for other tea dragon caregivers to bond with each other and share the tea with other people. So the tea dragons are all very adorable. There's chamomile, ginseng, all these rooibos, I believe, and it's just super cute. And so this particular one, by the way, they all kind of deal with hard topics. This particular one deals with themes of loss. You have one of the tea dragons who has experienced the loss of their caregiver, is now being taken care of by a new caregiver, and is struggling with that. Like the tea dragon is not happy, is not pretending to be happy, and the new caregiver is struggling to try to find ways to make things better for her tea dragon, and she kind of has to learn, like, grief is a process. You got to let them get through it and just be there with them through it. So that's kind of a lesson for her. And then there is another character who has left her home and who is changing who she is, and kind of the loss of who she used to be, and reconciling that with who she is now, and that's okay. Those are the two big themes in the story, and it's just really enjoyable. I cried numerous times while reading this because I just really identified with the characters in it. It felt very close to home. It was just really, really great. Highly, highly recommend. So yeah, this one, 5 out of 5 stars. The next graphic novel that I read is called The Magic Fish by Trung Nuyen. Nuyen? I don't know, but this is a story about a young boy who is gay, and he is struggling to come out to his parents. He does not really know how to say it to them because he does not feel that there is a word in Vietnamese to appropriately describe what he wants to say. His mom and dad are from Vietnam. He was born here, and they just don't have the same capability of talking to each other because he is more fluent in English than he is in Vietnamese. So a way that they're trying to get closer and understand each other better is he is reading fairy tales to her, and in the book you can see the pages, like you can actually see the fairy tale characters and everything on the page, and then it goes back to current time with the main character. And basically it's just him trying to figure out how to tell his parents that he likes boys while simultaneously liking a boy at school and dealing with that. This story does have a involuntary outing of a gay person in it, so tread carefully if that is something that would be triggering for you. I am not a gay person, but it was pretty hard for me to read that because it was just so unfair and just devastating to me. But I think that it was relevant to the story. I think that it needed to be in here because I think it's a reality that a lot of people face, and people like me who are not part of the community need to read that to be like, that was a really cruel thing to do to somebody. So yeah, that was the biggest thing in here that I think would be triggering for readers. But overall, a really beautiful story. The art was beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it. I also gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. The next one is called The Dire Days of Willow Manor. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. It was perfectly enjoyable and fun. The main character is a lover of all things gothic romance, and she has written 4 papers, I think, on Wuthering Heights of all things. And her teacher's like, for the love of God, please choose something else to write about. And she's annoyed by this because she's like, what else is there? Gothic romances are the best thing ever, blah. So she's contemplating this as she's walking home from school, and she sees somebody like, as she's walking home from school and she walks over this bridge, and out in the water she sees somebody who's like struggling to swim, possibly drowning. So she takes it upon herself to dive into the water and pull the person ashore, and it's actually this guy. And she pulls him ashore, but where they come up is not where she jumped in at. They're actually in an alternative world that is based on a Gothic romance. And so you learn throughout the story that there is kind of like a multiverse situation happening, and an evil entity that is trying to destroy different worlds in the multiverse. And so she and these gentlemen from this Gothic romance sort of setting have to figure out how to beat this big bad. Very cute. I would love to see more in this same storyline, same series. I'm not sure if it's going to be a series, but it was super cute. I really enjoyed it, and I give it 4 out of 5 stars. It wasn't anything earth-shattering, but it was enjoyable, and I would recommend it. The next one is The Thud. This is by Michael Ross, and this one is based in Germany. Your main character is named Noel, and he has some sort of developmental disability. It is not on page said what kind of developmental disability it is, but he has some struggles with performing basic life tasks. He acts very young. His age is not given, but he looks a bit older in the drawings than he behaves. And he lives with his mother, who is his primary caregiver, and something happens and his mother is not able to care for him anymore, and he has to go live in this place that I'm going to mispronounce. It is called Nuyen, maybe? Anyway, it is a town that is in Germany that is mostly inhabited by people who are developmentally disabled. There are able-bodied and able-mentalityed caregivers there, but like the population is almost exclusively developmentally disabled people. And so Noel goes and lives in what I think would essentially be a group home with other people with developmental disabilities, and stays there during the time that his mother is not able to take care of him and is being taken care of by the caregivers at the group home. And it just kind of goes through his experience with that, the devastating thing that happens, that he isn't sure how to navigate, meeting new people, making friends, falling in love. There are instances in this that talk about the Nazis. It is set in Germany. I'm not sure the history of Nuyen, if it has something to do with Nazi Germany or not, or if it was in response to it. I'm not really sure. I tried to look it up, but I didn't get a whole lot of information that was super clear one way or another for me. But essentially, in the story, this place existed during Nazi occupation of Germany and was where a lot of the developmentally disabled people were kept. And they talk about what happened to the developmentally disabled during Hitler's reign. So trigger warning for that. It is pretty heavy stuff for sure, but it was honestly really like powerful too. And I think that this one, I've never heard of this until I saw it at the library, and I just think that it is really worth reading because all the characters are developmentally disabled. We don't see that very often. They're neurodiverse, and it's just like a cute story from their perspective. So I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. This one also just kind of ended randomly, which is why the half star came off. I felt like there was more that could have been said, but that's me. I don't really like an abrupt ending. I don't like an ending that doesn't feel semi-wrapped up, or at least have a cliffhanger that, yeah, I know I'm going to get more. So that's the only negative to this. Everything else about it I thought was great. So 4.5 out of 5 is not bad, obviously. The next book is Punderworld by Linda Sedjik. This, I think, was a webtoon before it became a graphic novel, and it is a Hades and Persephone retelling. It's been published by Image, which is my top graphic novel publisher that I absolutely adore. I love pretty much anything I have read from Image. So this one was no exception to that rule. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was really wonderful. If you like Hades and Persephone retellings, this one will be right up there with ones that you enjoy. It is honestly a little bit awkward, like that cute awkward where people who like each other don't know how to tell each other they like each other kind of thing. So I hope that there's going to be more of this, because this volume ended on like a oh gosh moment, and I want to know what happens next. I could probably find it, I would assume, online somewhere if it started out as a webtoon, but I enjoyed myself immensely. If you like Lore Olympus, you'd probably like this. The art in this is a lot more like your traditional comic book style art, where Lore Olympus is a little more like, I don't know really how to describe it, but different. Obviously, if you've seen Lore Olympus, you know what I'm talking about. So I really liked this. There's not much else to say about it. I mean, Hades and Persephone retellings, it's all basically the same story, just with a facelift from person to person who does it, but it was cute, so I would recommend it. 4 out of 5 stars. The next one, and one of the better graphic novels that I have ever read, that is Nubia Real One by L.L. McKinney. And this is essentially the story of a girl who has the powers of Wonder Woman, but she's a black girl. And she has to hide that she has these powers because her moms, she has 2 moms, so good representation there. They are worried that she will not receive the same positive response to her protecting others with her super strength. There's a lot of racial undertones in this because she's black. She wouldn't get the same thanks as a white hero. I believe that this was written during the Black Lives Matter protests. It reads to me like it was written then. I wonder if I can find the publishing date in here. Oh yeah, 2021. So I think that this was written in response to some of that. But you see some marching and protests due to a fatal shooting of a black youth in this. And you see Nubia a couple times. She uses her powers and doesn't get a great response. In the past, you see some like flashbacks of those times. And then she does it again in this and has to hide, and it's all very stressful. But you find out some really cool surprises in it that I don't want to give away. And basically, Nubia is a badass superhero, and I want all of the things about her. She's great. And the story itself was just so interesting to read. The art was beautiful. The relationships among the characters was beautiful. And then the surprise at the end was really, really good. And it really wasn't even at the end. It was like at the halfway mark. It was great. So I have nothing negative to say about this. 5 out of 5 easy stars. Pick this one up if you like graphic novels, especially if you like superheroes, Wonder Woman. DC did a great job with this. So the final book that I read for October was Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse Five in graphic novel form. The person who actually did the graphic novel was Ryan North, but it's based upon Kurt Vonnegut's novel. I have read Slaughterhouse Five in book form, and it's one of my favorite like modern classics. Vonnegut I love. I think he has such an interesting voice with his work. And I really like that this graphic novel exists, because the book can be kind of confusing, especially if you don't typically read that sort of thing, and it's like all over the place and super trippy and weird. And this one just like, I think does a really good job of making sense of the novel in a more linear way that makes sense to the reader. So I definitely enjoyed this. I had been wanting to read this for a long time, and I was super excited when I saw it at the library. So I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. If you have read Slaughterhouse Five, you will enjoy this. Basically, the premise of Slaughterhouse Five is Billy Pilgrim is a soldier, and he's not the best soldier. He's kind of weak, and all of that isn't really cut out for that life, but ends up enlisting. And it's basically about the bombing of Dresden, and he was there for that. And it also kind of goes through his experience of being captured by the Nazis. It goes through his experience of kind of losing his mind a little bit and like hallucinating. There's like aliens and different things that happen in this. This has some of my most favorite quotes that I have. Like I have a tattoo on my body of a typewriter, and on the paper it says "So it goes," and "So it goes" is from this book. Another one that I love is "Everything is beautiful and nothing hurt," and that is another big one from this as well. And you don't see as much of those bits in the graphic novel. I would always recommend to read the actual novel first, but if you want a little bit of a primer, you could pick this up. But I really enjoyed it, and it is just one of those really poignant and sticks with you books. So definitely give this one a try. 5 out of 5 stars here as well. So those were all the books that I finished in the month of October. As I said before, I started the Hawthorne Legacy, which was the second one in the Inheritance Game series. I also am quite a bit of the ways, this actually isn't totally right because I've listened to some since last I moved my bookmark, but I'm working my way through the Way of Kings. I'm very much enjoying this. Dalinar is my favorite character. If you've read this book, hopefully you feel similarly. I like Kaladin, I like Shallan, you know, some of the other characters. I like Mokay. Sometimes I'm really tired of Kaladin's bits because they're depressing, but like I love Dalinar. We just got back to Dalinar back here, so I'm very excited to read what is coming up for him. But this is really good. I'm going to finish it before the end of the year. I'm not sure if I'm going to be done with it in November. I hope to be, but we'll have to see. The other book that I started this month and didn't finish, it's The Witching Hour. My cats are acting stupid. I started The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty on Scribd. So I actually haven't even noted it in here where I stopped so far. But I'm really enjoying this one as well. And this actually is on my TBR for November. So I am going to make sure that I get this one done. Fingers crossed. But yeah, those are the books that I started but didn't finish this month. So I feel pretty good. I can finally take my graphic novels back to the library that I've had out for way too long. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I plan to keep doing these wrap-ups. I plan to keep doing TBRs, different things like that. If there's any particular content that you would like to see from me, please let me know. I have a lot of like winter-themed stuff that I want to do. I have an announcement video coming. I'm going to be hosting a read-along in December, January, and February, and I'll give you more details about that this month before it starts. But if you want to see anything in particular from me, please let me know. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys come back next time. Have a great one. Bye.